Welcome. Today's post is Baseball Perfection. Published on July 14, 2023. There have been exactly 24 perfect games in MLB history. 24 perfect games out of 235,500 games over 150 plus years. This last month the New York Yankees netted that 24th. Given that pro baseball is clearly rigged, what message is sent with this extremely rare calm? Here are the topics we'll be decoding today. You can always find this list in the description below. If you enjoy this video, please press the like button, and subscribe for weekly full-length blog posts, and shorter, more shareable videos. Let's begin. There have been exactly 24 perfect games in MLB history. 24 perfect games out of 235,500 games over 150 plus years. This last month the New York Yankees netted that 24th. First and second perfect game. Often the best way to understand comms is to go back to the origin. June 10, 1880, bad pitching by Porman, first to allow 2 home runs by the same batter in the same inning. June 12, 1880, Richmond first perfect pitched game ever in baseball. June 17, 1880, Montgomery Ward's second perfect game beating Porman team. A pitcher named Montgomery Ward threw a perfect pitched game. This was as the company Montgomery Ward had just begun sending their revolutionary catalog all over the USA. Define pitching. Perfect pitching was defining this new national push to sell goods. Selling at a lower price than local markets, it heralded a new way of selling nationally that caught fire. The predecessor of Amazon, one could say. Remember, the goal of the pitcher is to get the ball to the catcher without the batter getting in the way, in this case that's symbolizing America. The symbols of Porman losing and Rich winning parallel the catalog running circles around local poor sellers. This ties into my decoding of baseball's origin as a collaboration of companies. This is why Batman is defined by a wealthy CEO who as a hobby helps the government fight crime. The Batmobile symbolizing the ops tied to the auto industry. Third perfect game. May 5, 1904. Third perfect game, Cy Young Philadelphia Athletics, Elephants. May 4, 1904. Construction begins by the U.S. on the Panama Canal under Teddy Roosevelt, Elephant. Elephant pitching perfect. Another revolution in pitching, this time global shipping. It's difficult to appreciate in today's world, but look at the map. It cut the entire trip around Africa off travel times for shipping. A symbol sent for perfect pitching by Cy Young because the project had just started. A commitment to finish as it took a decade. This calm reinforces the first two because if we are defining milestones in shipping goods, these are logical choices. 1 and 2, Montgomery Ward, National Shipping Revolution. 3, Panama Canal, Global Shipping Revolution. Fourth perfect game. October 2, 1908, fourth perfect pitched game Addie Joss Chicago White Sox. October 1, 1908, Ford Motor Company invents the Model T. October 1, 1908, Penny Post International Mailing opens in UK/US. The Model T is another perfect match because it introduced the assembly line which revolutionized consumer goods. An international mail system opened lines from US to UK that day, and that may have been a message of readiness to ship globally. Many comms were sent tied to car origins, more here. But this is where things get a little tricky. Yankee Perfection. Baseball comms aren't always about consumer goods, and the newest perfect game is the fourth perfect game of the New York Yankees. So before we answer what the pitches meant, I have to answer what the symbolism even is of a New York Yankee. A Yankee is a term coined by Britain media to mock United States citizens, but this was then adopted into the lexicon as a point of pride. It was a foreign caricature of America, accepted into America as America. A symbol that by definition trying to be America. I believe this symbol is used to represent someone pretending to be American that isn't. Let's look at their first perfect game for a clue on usage. October 8, 1956. New York Yankees' first perfect game World Series. October 9, 1956. Trapped family film about Germans who rejected Hitler and escaped to USA. Notice the famous image attached to it, Yogi Bear leaping into the arms. Yogi Bear. September 29, 1958. Yogi Bear debut. October 1, 1958. World Series Yankees Yogi Berra. October 6, 1958. World Series Yankees comeback after 3 losses with Yogi Berra. October 6, 1958. Yogi Bear's second episode involves sleeping, judo flipping and Yankee Doodle Duck. Episode about adult bear sleeping with child duck. A child duck that quickly gets combative and forces Yogi to leave. A symbol perhaps of not keeping blackmail in the same place it's taken. 1958 is when Jimmy Savile officially began radio and preying on children. The public face of blackmail ops, but I'll talk more about him later in the post. For now let's go back to Yankees and this symbol of immigration. October 8, 1956. New York Yankees' first perfect game World Series. October 9, 1956. Trapped family film about Germans who rejected Hitler and escaped to USA. History of Operation Paperclip equals symbol of foreign agents moving into new territories. That film was the original foreign release origin of The Sound of Music, a movie most known for saving Fox. It was also the first song played at the first Super Bowl. This is meaningful when we get into another event timed to that first perfect game. October 6, 1956. Johnny Unitas' secret first game. October 8, 1956. Perfect game New York Yankees. October 9, 1956. Trapped family Sound of Music. October 19, 1956. Soviet-Japanese joint declaration ending war between the two nations. October 21, 1956. Johnny Unitas' official first game. Unitas equals Unite plus US. Unitas symbolism is one I go into this post. A symbol of sides coming together, just like the two NFL leagues which merged, and their championship game took the form of the superb owl. Once again 1958. 1958 Yogi Bear debut. 1958 Yogi Berra World Series win. 1958 Johnny Unitas the greatest game ever played. 1958 Jimmy Savile debut radio/child predator. Jimmy Savile. August 18, 1958. Vladimir Nabokov book, Lolita. August 18, 1958. Savile's crime. Another Vladimir and probably the most famous one in between Vlad and Putin was Vladimir Nabokov. Famous Russian-American book about a man who sedates a 12-year-old girl named Dolly/Dolores so that he can have sex with her. Savile on the other hand was famous for being a beloved celebrity for decades and then suddenly the most hated man in the UK as decades of crimes against children were revealed. He died just before it all went public. Same week an investigation was opened. Porcelain Club. October 14, 1926. Winnie the Pooh. Plus 17/Q days. October 31, 1926. Jimmy Savile born. Blackmail symbol 17 days until Halloween, as in scare symbol. If it went public that is. Savile as radio broadcaster equals device to bring it public if necessary. Most famous moment in Savile's career is a clip played on UK TV frequently of Cub Scouts, Bear, getting cream all over them at Pleasure Beach Blackpool. Perfect symbol of something that looks entirely different to comms-aware people. A running joke. The Yankees were originally called the Highlanders. Highlanders. 19 March 1912. New York Highlanders. Why did it stop 1912? What about the 1986 movie? There can be only one. Highlanders was originally short for Gordon's Highlanders. A British military unit, and they were also called Invaders, as New York already had a major league team called the Giants. Why invoke the British military for an American team? July 1, 1881. Gordon's Highlanders British military unit formed Buck/DOE iconography, DOE equals Q 1977. July 2, 1881. Assassination of Republican President of the United States James A. Garfield with a British revolver. This may give us an origin point for the famous DOE/Q symbol associated with Rothschild. This gives us an affiliation if nothing else. Invaders was a fitting title. It also connects the dots on why they would switch location and name to Yankees in 1913. That's when the Federal Reserve began. The independent government within the U.S. government. They were also tied not just to Highlanders but to the Baltimore Orioles, who they replaced. Orioles had their debut alongside the American League the same year President McKinley was murdered. Replaced by a British military unit that began with the last POTUS assassination. If this interpretation is correct as the Rothschild invaders, then to confirm it I just have to dig into who it is they were invading. What was that team called? When did they start? Who attended their first game? The answer is the Yankees invaded the New York Gotham/Giants. The first game was attended by Republican President Ulysses S. Grant. That confirms affiliation, and note they were run out of town by the Yankees' popularity. Equals control over the media. I can further clarify by looking at the members. Montgomery Ward was a key player for the Gotham/Giants. Remember the start of the post, Montgomery Ward's perfect game, defining the companies tied to baseball comms, cooperation to take over the market. Companies inside the USA collaborating through the league with the government. Sometimes this collaboration is for detective work, Batman/Gotham comms. Sometimes necessary given what we see with assassinations, but other times a lie and pretext of service to country for preferential treatment and money. Look up past government stimulus bills, and you'll find countless articles criticizing where that money ends up. In some cases surely for worthy ops coded in a nonsensical way, but in other cases it may be exactly as corrupt as it looks at a distance. Harding plus baseball. Before I get into my new findings on Harding, I have to quickly establish what I already decoded about him. In this post I decoded the rise and fall of POTUS Warren Harding. Specifically, how he represented Republicans accepting the Federal Reserve by taking money from the cookie jar. This is why he had the same last name as the then acting head of the Fed. When this fell apart he died and his corruption went public. Reminds me of this. If instead of Trump revealing corruption and being blamed for it, it was instead everybody with their hands in it. Why did I bring that up? Reconcile baseball at the time of his presidency. 1921 President Harding. 1921 New York Giants beat New York Yankees World Series. 1922 New York Giants beat New York Yankees World Series. August 1923, President Harding death. October 1923, New York Yankees beat New York Giants World Series. The Democrat Party set up the Fed, and Harding represented the other side, Republican-affiliated, agreeing to the scam. The Giants given the win year after year until it fell apart. Perfect game modern times. Perfect game another one. An obvious thread to pull with the Yankees is of their famous owner. George Steinbrenner had a significant role as George's boss on Seinfeld. He appeared in the finale, the fourth most watched finale of all time. What are the odds of a Yankees perfect game hitting? May 14, 1998. Seinfeld finale, fourth biggest finale, cast gets arrested becomes known as the New York Four, includes Yankees owner in court testifying. May 17, 1998. New York Yankees second perfect game 4-0. 4/4/4. Notice the way the Yankees owner is used in the episode. He calls George a communist, and it ends with someone yelling at him for giving a Japanese player named Hideki a contract for $12 million to play for the Yankees. This unlocks a comm I already decoded from another angle. I'm referring to the KGB comms tied to getting Putin back in control, but these comms unlock quite a bit more than that. February 2000. Ken Griffey Jr. traded to the Reds in exchange for Meyer/Cameron. May 2000. KGB Putin takes over Russia officially. KGB, Ken Griffey, left the Reds when the USSR broke down, KGB out, and transferred to Japan with Japan taking over Mariners. Japan influx in MLB. KGB SR KGB JR Coms. Then KGB JR returns to Reds as KGB Putin gets in power restoring Russia. Former KGB Putin brings it back. To legacy KGB. May 29, 1997. Yankees sign four-year contract with Hideki as part of a trade involving Homer Bush and Maxwell. May 27, 1997. Russia signs historic NATO pact agreeing to give up all nuclear warheads aimed at West. Symbolism of Russia agreeing to defuse blackmail. What was exchanged? Interesting names involved in those trades. Understanding how this reconciliation connects with Seinfeld requires history. July 4, 1989. Reagan bucked off a horse. July 5, 1989. Seinfeld debut. Steinbrenner calls out the delicious sandwich. Symbol of a job I've shown in posts. But then he is accused of communism. Steinbrenner is called out on the Japanese contract. A contract tied to a Russian agreement to disarm nukes. Steps to let Russia return. It's clear these trades in baseball were tied to agreements in the political sphere globally. International baseball comms go way back. First of the 7 summits to be climbed. July 27, 1874. Tallest Russian mountain first climbed. July 30, 1874. First international baseball game between Red Stockings and A's, Elephants, in England. Republican president from 1869–1877. Anyway, the Seinfeld finale is about the cast getting arrested for doing nothing as crimes happen. This is a play on the structure of the show about nothing. It's possible that a symbol of nothing was in not letting Russia act and that led to the KGB breakdown. The indifference is specifically associated with what killed Princess Diana. The final episode concludes with a 1-year jailing to indifference. This matches up with when the next perfect game was held. And perhaps the necessary prep time for letting Russia get back. May 17, 1998. Yankees' second perfect. July 18, 1999. Yankees' third perfect. It was a game where the first perfect pitcher for the Yankees from 1956 World Series threw the ceremonial pitch to Yogi Berra on Yogi Bear Day. They had just reconciled with Steinbrenner. Clearly I need to decode Yogi Bear. Yogi Bear. September 29, 1958. Yogi Bear debut. October 1, 1958. World Series Yankees Yogi Berra. October 6, 1958. World Series Yankees comeback after 3 losses with Yogi Berra. October 6, 1958. Yogi Bear's second episode involves sleeping, judo flipping, and Yankee Doodle Duck. 1958 episode about adult bear sleeping with child duck. A child duck that gets combative and forces Yogi to leave. A symbol perhaps of not keeping blackmail in the same place it's taken. 1958. New op starting in 1958 tied to using unaware children. 1958 Jimmy Savile debut radio. 1958 David Seville debut radio. Origin of Chipmunks, Teddy, Kids Plus recording. Witch doctor song about getting a girl that isn't interested. Witch doctor synonymous with creating love potions, sedation. Notice strings in the iconography of people all over the world. Control through love potion. I went over Teddy, but Simon is also a com, just one tied to following orders. Not necessarily MK, but in either case it's a symbol of control over another. The girl chipmunk version of Teddy is Eleanor, as in Roosevelt. I went over 1986 comms with Chernobyl in relation to the chipmunk comms. Both symbolism of crashes to a former practice. No longer, around the world in 80 days. The point being the tech transition once again. In fact, I noticed this week that Witch Doctor song is played at the end of Grease even though I can't find any list of it anywhere online. May 17, 1978. Grease, You're the One That I Want, top song from the top musical movie of its time. May 17, 1978. Spider-Man, origin of Japanese big robot ranger shows which symbolized the tech push. May 17, 1978. Lisa Jobs born, namesake of the Lisa computer. The transition in tech comms follows a few franchises. Grease was a massive hit, the biggest movie of 1978. Then released the sequel to bomb status alongside E.T., which was the first movie to beat Star Wars in the box office. June 11, 1982. Grease 2 bomb film. June 11, 1982. End of Atari comms tied to Nintendo NES ROB launch. Returning to Seinfeld finale. Starts with a monologue about going to sleep and op put to bed. Main plot starts and ends with Kramer trying to get water out of his ear, leading to a near plane crash. Water equals info. Next topic after Kramer introducing the water at the ear is Kramer asserting Jerry's upcoming pilot of Seinfeld will lead to prostitutes. It could be the info at the gear is blackmail prep to be heard. Episode ends with the water coming out. Info put to bed. Episode directly before the finale involved a focus on assassination symbolism with a running story tied to the Hindenburg and a laser pointer mistaken for a sniper. Given the Seinfeld comms tied to tracking ops, it may clarify Kramer. The unhinged neighbor of Jerry is a likely MK symbol, and his trademark entering Jerry's apartment with no warning could be a symbol of surveillance. I suspect the name, Kramer, is tied to this movie. Biggest box office of 1979 based on a 1977 book. A story about custody of a child. This hypothesis was reinforced when I looked into the dates tied to it. May 5, 1977. Kramer vs. Kramer rights purchased, Merrill. May 5, 1977. Pilot of the Love Boat, McLeod, Highlander, as Captain Merrill. Context is key, and the symbol of the film is a custody fight between Hoffman and Merrill. Both played Jewish characters, but critically Hoffman's family dates to Ukraine. Chernobyl. Mary Streep began 1979 and was billed as Merrill, perhaps to connect the comms. September 17, 1976. Love Boat first pilot. September 17, 1976. Space Shuttle Enterprise launch with entire Star Trek cast. January 20, 1977. Jimmy Carter inauguration, DOE/Q. January 21, 1977. Second Love Boat pilot. Data custody blackmail/surveillance. I also found a 1977 legal case, Kramer v. Kramer, with a Hoffman with the same moniker. Even filed May 5 and seemed to be a comm about payment tied to Lockheed. By itself, none of this so far is conclusive though. This is just me following patterns. Which led me to May 5, 1977. Final pilot Love Boat McLeod, Highlander. May 5, 1977. Kramer vs. Kramer rights purchased custody battle of child. May 5 equals clear communication comm. May 5, 1969. Hideki Irabu born. The Japanese pitcher the Yankees purchased focused on in the Seinfeld finale. He died 2011 just after Fukushima, reportedly due to a broken heart of losing custody of his children. Just like Kramer vs. Kramer. Chernobyl/Fukushima ops are both tied to control over data. The symbol in 1977 was data handled moved by Russia/Israel/Japan with storage Fukushima/Chernobyl. 1986 ending Chernobyl and 2011 ending Fukushima. Custody, symbolism. Geraldo plays the role of reporter for the Seinfeld court case. Vault comms tied to Chernobyl. Data control jobs. July 11, 1997. George Tenet appointed Director of Central Intelligence. July 10, 1997. Hideki first game. which could give us clarity on how he was used as a symbol. Control of classified data. July 22, 2013. Discharge of radioactive water from Fukushima. July 22, 2013. Kanye Quest game with cult game hidden for years inside it released. Symbol of the types of data tied to the Fukushima ops. Reinforcing the control of MK data. Tenet was the CIA guy tied to data control over 9/11. The new Yankees perfect game. 99 pitches, 11 score. Can't help but think of 9/11. Especially given it's against the Elephants. If I keep tracking trajectory of patterns, it usually converges on the right answer. Let's go over the newest one. Perfect game, present day. June 29, 2023. Domingo German's troubled road to perfect game, domestic violence to sticky stuff. Notice the focus on having a shady past. Context is always critical for decoding. This perfect game was against the Oakland Elephants. This is a symbol of Republicans. So, Republicans to lose. He was supposed to wear 55, but instead decided on 0. 55 is a clear communication comm, so for him to choose not to clearly communicate as part of his perfect game story, and instead pick 0. I can't be sure of this yet, but I believe we are seeing comms of media distortion tied to Biden. I already decoded Biden as intentionally screwing things up, and moreover he would be hobbled online due to Twitter and other changes online. But what about mainstream media? I believe it's much the same here. Notice the front page talking about how terrible Domingo German was, and then inexplicably as 0, pulling off the most elite of all baseball feats. Remember how the media constantly covered HRC as winning big over Trump? I believe it's much the same here. Notice the front page talking about how terrible Domingo German was, and then inexplicably as 0, pulling off the most elite of all baseball feats. Scandals will continue to mount for Biden, but headlines will show Biden winning and Trump losing, but this is not 55 clear communication. Mainstream media will prop Biden up and keep voters from rallying a replacement leading into the next election. Constant legal issues brushed under the rug. Like Domingo's domestic violence and cheating. Juxtaposed to election cheating, all of it going on in the background with courts, but we see nothing but a song and dance from mainstream media. Doing terribly but inexplicably winning. That's my hypothesis. It's not highly confident yet. Kramer. May 25, 1971. Justin Henry born object of custody fight Kramer vs. Kramer. May 26, 1971. American Pie recorded Chevy Levy Day music died. American Pie equals story of assassination plots. Justin equals just plus in, hence next day. Symbol of evidence. This reinforces the symbol of Kramer when invoked by Saw as the mastermind of kidnapping murders. The way this connects with Seinfeld's iteration is in Kramer being an easily manipulated lunatic. The kind MK'd and let loose on enemies, which is why they are monitored. MK subjects aren't all dumb, but they are all conditioned into act as desired. Traumatized in various ways over long periods of time. A way to kill without getting caught as the subject perceives it as their own plan. They are driven to act. December 18, 1979. Moon Treaty establishes protocol for custody of space resources. December 19, 1979. Kramer vs. Kramer custody film. Ownership of the moon is used in comms to define secret data. Home Run Derby. July 10, 2023. Home Run Derby won by Vladimir Guerrero. Vladimir? Seems like a fair bet this is a Putin/Russia comm, but what does it mean to win the Home Run Derby? Notice the reporting of this being the one repeating the father's feat in Seattle. July 9, 2007. Home Run Derby Vladimir Guerrero winner 17 homers ATT Park Toronto Blue Jays. July 10, 2007. Russian territorial expedition performed first crewed descent to the ocean bottom. Home run derby symbolism equals getting more homes, as in territory. What home expansion might it refer to? Given we are talking about Russia and expansion, I can't help but think of Ukraine. July 11, 2023. Leaders agree to expedite Ukraine's NATO membership events to come off and make past comms clear. It could just as easily be talking about expansions online as opposed to maps, so let's get into history. July 15, 1985. First home run derby won by Cincinnati Reds, Cobra, Dave Parker. July 15, 1985. Miss Universe pageant. Reds is often used to symbolize Russia. Expansion of what? My best hypothesis at the moment is blackmail. Based on my decodes, the Ukraine meltdown in 1986 represented a shutting down of storage of blackmail, and so it stands to reason that they may have been expanding before that. Snowden 2013 plus Russia Miss Universe. Though based on common sense I don't think Snowden ever left China. Russia surely had blackmail, or otherwise secret, data in play regardless given history and tone of comms around this time. I recently decoded Peru as a symbol of child sacrifice. This was rooted in the fact it's the primary location discussed in articles about child sacrifice. Typically in articles about Incan ancient history. Always finding new burial grounds, one-upping the last one with sacrifices. One of my students noticed the most important ancient site in Peru, Machu Picchu, was built by Tupac. This led me to notice the last ruler of the child sacrificing Incas equals Tupac Amaru, first plus middle name of the rapper. By itself that means little, but they kept going. Given Machu Picchu equals MK building com Pichu equals Piku. 1996 Pokemon debut Piku/Pikachu. 1996 Tupac's death. This led me to unlock an important layer to Pokemon. An electric mouse that says Piku. His last name equals Crooks. I've already decoded Pokemon as symbolism tied to creating a Pokédex, the catalog of monsters. With this new context, the symbolism of what is being cataloged becomes crystal clear. Piku. As in cataloging Machu Picchu equals MK Ops. Moreover, I can confirm this from a different angle. NK is another MK symbol. Now it gets a little confusing with so many symbols for the same thing, but I'll explain the logistics of that momentarily. For now, notice MK Ultra studies began with North Korea and other Reds. And how does NK relate to Tupac? April 29, 1995. North Korea WCW/Japan wrestling record for largest ever attendance for any wrestling event. April 29, 1995. Tupac Amaru marries Morris after serving 4 months in jail. Highest ever viewership, the precursor to the Pokemon push, the biggest media franchise in history. It also has the US plus Japanese push tied to it, with it being a cross-promotion between Japanese pro wrestling and the West. Same reason it's timed to a comet. Notice the vent is compared to Pluto, which is yet another MK com. The logistics of so many different comms for the same thing comes down to symbol type. Each one is its own language, and just like you would have a word for basic things in every language. Ancient history equals Incan child sacrifice equals MK, because it's child sacrifice. Current geography NK equals MK, because it involves a despot programming citizens plus actual history tied to MK mind control techniques. Pluto equals MK, hell/mythology reasons. It has to be that way because otherwise you'd have conversations where you are talking ancient history comms, and you'd need to talk about space or something. Every language has self-contained symbolism, so there's going to be a lot of words for the same thing. Especially since the whole point of talking in comms is secrecy, and as the two biggest secret practices that exist are blackmail and MK, so naturally it's gonna be everywhere. Speaking of the underworld and afterlife. November 13, 1996. Tupac's death, famous in pop culture for not really being dead. November 13, 1996. House of the Dead saga. And now that we understand the symbolism tied to Pokemon, we can take this a step further. December 18, 1998. House of the Dead story begins, literally the game starts with this date jumping out. December 18, 1998. Pokémon trading card game debut, most popular trading card game in world, 52 billion sold. It gives the date for an escalation of ops. Big money equals ops alongside it. August 10, 1997. Designated terrorist group Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement United States. August 11, 1997. WWF D-Generation X-Pac. X-Pac being a parody of Tupac and a member of D-Generation X, debut a day after Tupac group officially designated a terrorist group. Another take from a reader. Machu Picchu. Pichu equals coca leaf chewing. Coca equals cocaine. MK ops are supercharged with introduction of drugs. I can attest to that as I was MK'd and from elementary school to high school I was pressured into taking drugs countless times. For many years every peer I knew was a drug user and trying to get me into it every day. Their persistence had the opposite effect of intended. The fact that I didn't take drugs became a defining part of my relationship with the MK crowd. It was at times a point of hostility but morphed into a running gag. Even without drugs, MK abuse pushed my mind past breaking points. Pushed past suicide and into the kind of desperation for any end that gives birth to monsters. But had I faltered and taken drugs like the others did, I would have lost the ability to recover and learn from the past. But that history is for another day. I've told tiny parts of it, but most of the important parts remain unsaid. Much of what I've gone over has been about the Yankees. Originally called Highlander. Yankee Highlander. This has given us enough to unlock the meaning of a long-standing pop culture com. The basic symbol of the Yankees is a symbol of someone foreign attached to an American identity. The British Highlander symbol which preceded the Yankees com is a symbol of the secret identity. Movie says as much at the start. A broad range of applications from media with Yankee, including blackmail and even murder. Highlander Yankees 19 December 1913, as Titanic paved the way for the Fed. Lou Gehrig, Murderers Row, Yankees 6. June 21, 1939, Yankees announce Lou Gehrig's retirement. Doctors reveal Lou Gehrig disease. June 29, 1939, Smith Act introduced, push against foreign agents requiring fingerprinting of aliens and other measures. Symbol of getting foreign agents out of the line of fire. This brings us back to Highlander. March 1986, Highlander. April 1986, Chernobyl disaster. Just about everything released around Chernobyl was comms about it. Co-star and teacher Sean Connery, who played as the original James Bond, both living secret lives as defined by the intro. Notice he began playing Bond soon after Playboy began publishing James Bond. I'm sure you remember Q highlighting the blackmail involving children tied to Playboy. May 3, 1986, Silver Dollar City, Tennessee reopens as Dollywood theme park. May 4, 1986, Chernobyl contained. May 5, 1986, Dollywood People magazine. Dolly Parton, no trap. What trap? Dolly/Dolores, being the child from the Russian-American novel Lolita that is the victim of sedated rape. Another famous Dolores is on Seinfeld. Rhymes with a female sex organ joke. Same year equals movie about Dolores, movie hiding an identity with help from the church networks. Dolores played by Goldberg and a Seinfeld about a junior mint equals money. Symbol of safeguarding the blackmail by keeping it out of the government's hands. Company behind Highlander is Alan Cameron. A symbol for the Allen Memorial Hospital Dr. Cameron MK experiments. The only MK ops that were widely published in 1977, which is why they are often referenced in comms. Music by Cayman equals mask in Japan. Hidden identity. August 3, 1977, MK Ultra hearing Senate. August 3, 1977, James Bond Spy Who Loved Me USA premiere, story about nuclear material that could trigger a war. Highlander stars the original, James Bond. Going through his place in the movie is the quickest way to understand the whole. Sean Connery plays an Egyptian in this film, Pyramids, acts as a mentor. First things he teaches is how to conceal his gift and feel like a stag, as in DOE/stag party. Playboy was originally called Stag Party. Same time frame as the first nuclear reaction at Stag Field. The part that really makes it clear the point of this, the origin of his Highlander sword. The sword is a major focus of much of the film, specifically in how the main character obtains it and retrieves it. The love interest of Highlander is obsessed with learning more about it. A Japanese sword Sean Connery uses to cut the throat and chest of the Russian. Russia, beheaded by a metal symbol of Japan, is a reference to what happened in the early 80s. The dragon head sword is a symbol of the Japanese tech industry of the 1980s. Dragon is a variant of a snake symbol equals many working as one. The symbol for snake/dragon can be good or bad depending on context. For example, Kamen Rider, which was a com tied to the first tech push, had as its primary villain a head made up of snakes. Symbol of the many different groups of people. This doesn't make Highlander a negative com for the USA though. Note the lines of England recognized the independence of the United States. Both sides had just started cooperating, as I go through extensively in my Top Gun Decode. This ties into the World Series that year with the New York Mets winning, a team tied to the Bush family who was in the White House at that time. A deal was made for media and other types of support in exchange for shutting down certain pushes. Namely getting out of tech. So these comms are recharacterizing Highlander as a positive. This is why there are sections of the film rejecting perceptions of their power as coming from devil worship. Keep in mind that the whole point of MK Ops is the person behind them is unknown. They exist by getting a criminal to decide to act against opponents. As a result, the people tied to Highlander would forever claim to be uninvolved even though they would seem the most likely. This is why there is this transition over time into surveillance of agents to define where exactly these MK comms are and defusing them with the help of the new Highlander, so to speak. Before this, Russia/Maxwell, Mossad/Murdoch were working together. This is likely why we see early in the film a Murdoch working with the Russian villain, but later the modern Murdoch is a police chief. Notice the Murdoch paper is prominent in film. Many groups collaborating including wrestling, which may be why it begins there. Then he goes into the parking garage and gets surprised attacked. Note how after he takes out the first attacker all the cars in the garage explode. This is almost certainly a symbol for what happened with the DeLorean. A bunch of films I've decoded for this one, but basically DeLorean left GM and then was crushed. Just like Atari, Mossad, exiting and Nintendo taking over their position, this control of market is something fought over. Highlander beheads with Japanese metal and wins. The prize all Highlanders fight over is defined at the end as being able to hear what every famous politician, diplomat and scientist in the world is thinking. I.e. control over blackmail and MK surveillance, which is what Chernobyl represented. Connection with Studio 54 CBS Celebrity Sex Dungeon. Names involved clearly paint collab with Mossad and Russia. The villain being Russian clearly implies certain groups in USSR were the villain in 1986. Notice the man with the anti-Moscow shirt being killed by Kurgan. But it's not just Russia. Another clear comm was Russia once working with Murdoch. Another Murdoch in modern day acts as police chief and even interacts with the then Murdoch media. The final major connection being Japan used to behead Russia. November 1989. Fall of the Russian-built Berlin Wall. November 1989. Tetris released Russian game about walls, game published originally by Robert Maxwell. November 13, 1989. Judge rules Nintendo owns home console rights to Tetris, not Maxwell. November 13, 1989. Former Reds Dave Parker, Tech School, granted free agency. Russia chooses Japan over Maxwell. Not necessarily all of Russia, but enough to trigger the end of the USSR. March 1986, Highlander released. April 16, 1986, Israel Bechsky Commission leads to central bank head stepping down and other big resignations. April 26, 1986, Chernobyl disaster. Important context for those Israel bank scandals in 1986 is the fact that Likud had recently been removed from office. Note also that within just a few months of Chernobyl, Likud had regained Israel. Cooperation gained once again. It's a lot of data points, but it paints a clear picture. April 26, 1977, Studio 54 Club starts, Russia plus Mossad. May 17, 1977, Likud, Netanyahu, wins the first victory over left wing in over 30 years. May 17, 1977, Atari co-founder founds Chuck E. Cheese Robots plus arcade games, Tech Push. Remember the robots tied to Japan comms around the same time with the Sentai, Power Rangers, series. These are the Mossad variants. May 17, 1977, Likud first victory over left wing in over 30 years. May 18, 1977, DOE passed Senate 74-10. August 3, 1977, MK Ultra hearing. August 4, 1977, DOE formed, Q clearance, nuclear changes. September 1977, Chernobyl goes online. April 1986, Chernobyl meltdown. April 1986, Studio 54 closes. Likud entering power with comms tied to blackmail and Russia partnership in the tech industry. It ends with Atari crashing in flames in 1983, which is when the bank crisis hit, leading to the investigation that removed the heads from the banks. Chernobyl was a symbol for the storage of blackmail tied to Studio 54, but symbolic of many more like it. Partnership of Russia plus Israel was shattered due to loss of capital thanks to bank, Israel, plus tech, Atari, destruction. Japan was given reins with RoboCop, when people break rules as they are surveilled. In this post I go over how Mossad was given reins over blackmail with the 1977 Atari plus Studio 54 comms. Symbolized in comics as Judge Dredd, as inability to enforce the law due to having footage of illegal acts. Judge Dredd, which then became the parody RoboCop as the ops moved to Japan. This was preferable to those in power as the data wouldn't stay in Japan. Mossad agents had already caused problems when Studio 54 provided videos to cops. Instead of local, blackmail data was relayed into North Korea where morality is irrelevant. It adds up, there are a lot of players, and therefore comms, but the comms point consistently in a specific direction. This is likely why we see so much today tied to these end points for data. Given Highlander as a series continued, what kind of comms were tied to its end? September 1, 2000, Highlander Endgame Final Lambert Film, Watchers. September 1, 2000, USA, Al Gore, plus Russia sign an agreement to dispose of plutonium after 2 years of negotiations. The point being once again handling of potentially compromising data. Nuclear. Studio 54 was originally a CBS studio, and so in buying and setting it up as a celebrity sex dungeon in 1977 sent a message I went over in this thread. Then the FBI raids. I mentioned CBS to discuss Sony in relation to the tech war. Despite being technically superior, Sony Betamax was killed off for VHS. Notice Nintendo's US design changes specifically to invoke VHS as a message. This attitude would change when Sony bought CBS assets. Chernobyl, comms also tie into Sonny and Cher. June 7, 1965, Sonny and Cher breakout hit recorded, I Got You Babe. June 7, 1965, Sony introduces its home videotape recorder. Sony equals Sonny comms. Cher equals Cher. June 26, 1975. Sonny and Cher divorce. June 27, 1975, Sony's Spider-Man Tobey Maguire born. Symbol of the data ops changing fundamentally. Why change? Cher marries a man named Allman 4 days later and then divorces 9 later. The result was a disastrous album 1977 right after MK Ultra hearing/DOEQ. Called Allman and Woman. As a symbol of every man and woman seeing the secrets, MK Ultra hearing, it failing equals message of no. I Got You, Babe, her breakout I covered as it related to Sony in the tech industry, but what about her most famous song? If I Could Turn Back Time. Released around the same time Sony purchased CBS Records. July 1, 1989, If I Could Turn Back Time, Cher. July 1, 1989, Zero Wing, All Your Bass Are Belong to Us, Namco. May 31, 1991, Zero Wing Home Consoles. May 31, 1991, Ken Griffey Sr. Final Day for Mariners. Ken Griffey Sr. Ken Griffey Jr., If I Could Turn Back Time. At the time Sony plus Nintendo comms were tied to their joint venture I Decode Here. I already covered how Ken Griffey Sr. Ken Griffey Jr. represented the generational change and so finding this, turn back time, comm tied to it fits perfectly. 1988 Ken Griffey Sr. moved from Reds to Mariners. 1989 Ken Griffey Jr. begins in Mariners. December 23, 1991, Nintendo of Japan agrees to buy Seattle Mariners /Ken Griffey Jr. Senior stated as thanks for Americans buying. December 25, 1991, Soviet collapse, KGB, Ken Griffey Jr. becomes top star. All Your Bass Are Belong to Us, symbolism representing the Japanese control, hence English. Spider-Man connection which I decoded as tied to Facebook, in modern incarnations, fits for this context of data control a few hours ago by Jack/Musk. I may have gotten a few small parts wrong, but overall the picture is getting clearer. Cats, cyborg, tech, taking, base, of a Western design. Note first meme in the montage is comm flake Star Wars, 1977, comms tied to data moving. 0 equals none. History of that, If I Could Turn Back Time, song, Cher in a band video in an outfit revealing her but straddling the cannons of the ship that the Japanese surrendered on in World War II. End of hostilities toward Sony due to the Betamax/VHS war. June 13, 2012, The Amazing Spider-Man Sony. June 13, 2012. Facebook launches Cookie Exchange, a real-time bidding ad system where advertisers can bid on users' personal data. You might wonder the history of Spider-Man comics given all these connections to internet tracking. December 10, 1984, Spider-Man Black Suit Introduction, Alien Suit. December 10, 1984, Cisco founded, Internet Networking. One of the most famous Spider-Man stories as it is the origin of Venom. First person the home run derby equals Cobra. Cobra and updates. Dave, the Cobra, Parker, shown on right. December 8, 1987, Cobra Dave Parker, Tech School, traded by Cincinnati Reds to Oakland Athletics. December 8, 1987, POTUS Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Gorbachev sign a treaty eliminating medium-range nuclear. November 13, 1989, Cobra Dave Parker, Tech School, granted free agency. November 13, 1989, Judge rules Nintendo owns home console rights to Tetris. This was part of a long legal fight where parts of Russia broke away from the old system, rejecting the prior commitments tied to Epstein. Ken Griffey equals KGB comms. December 21, 1988, Ken Griffey released by Cincinnati Reds. December 22, 1988, Tetris Nintendo released becomes their best-selling game of all time. Leaves Reds joins Mariners, which was literally purchased by Nintendo right after this. 1977 is the start of the Mariners, and also when Nintendo began selling consoles. It's also when Atari released the 2600, which became the best-selling console before Nintendo took the title. Mariners are literally Nintendo's team until 2016 and makes a connection obvious. August 28, 1990, Nintendo lifts the veil of secrecy on the SNES. August 29, 1990. Ken Griffey Sr. joins Mariners. August 31, 1990. Seattle Mariners outfielders Ken Griffey and Ken Griffey Jr. become first father and son to play on same team. SNES plus NES in market. December 23, 1991. Nintendo agrees to buy Mariners. December 25, 1991. Soviet collapse, KGB. Ken Griffey Sr. Ken Griffey Jr. generation change in Mariners. The connections father/son Ken Griffey in relation to Russia strikes me as a way to help define the new Vladimir Guerrero Jr./Sr. April 26, 2019. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. first game. April 25, 2019. Saudi prince buys Kusama pumpkins, all the eternal love I have for the pumpkins, estimated date based on article. Pumpkins equals scare ops, and I can confirm his connection to that from another angle. Notice his nickname Vlad the Impaler. A tyrant that tops just about every scariest person ever list you are likely to find. Which helps clarify what Russia has been doing recently and how they are perceived. All a show, but for an important purpose. Buying an expensive painting like that is symbolic of a commitment to the ops represented in the piece of art. What's especially important to note about this one is it was purchased alongside the Savior of the World painting, from a Russian. Pumpkins. What was COVID? So many things are not what they seem. I'm reminded of the about the minor attracted persons push. At a glance it looks like a push to normalize, but I believe it's meant to identify. Minor attracted person equals map. Mapping out the snake as you can't do anything if you don't know who and where they are. April 1986. Cobra legislation passed. April 1986. Chernobyl. May 1986. Cobra film based on Running Duck hits #1 box office. Story about ex-KGB agents. Post-breakup of Ops, Chernobyl, what happens to the KGB cells involved? Cobra symbol works perfectly in explaining Parker as the Reds, Cobra, that's what I decoded it as before solving Cobra. It fits basic logic as well when you consider G.I. Joe's villains were Cobra. Who was the US in a Cold War with at the time? July 1985. Cobra budget introduced as legislation. July 1985. Cobra Reds wins first ever home run derby debut. April 1986. Cobra becomes law. April 1986. Chernobyl meltdown. Cobra is famous as a budget for giving insurance after losing jobs. As in after losing share cells funded for move. One of my students one-upped my work by ascertaining the root symbol of Cobra. The primary villain of Pokemon is often represented by a cobra. Arbok Cobra mirrored. Symbol of the troublemakers being ex-KGB operators trying to set up new criminal operations. 1983 G.I. Joe vs. Cobra. 1984 Karate Kid 1 equals Cobra Kai villain. 1985 Cobra Home Run Derby. 1986 Cobra Stallone, 160 million box office, crime is a disease meet the cure. 1986 Karate Kid Part 2. 1986 G.I. Joe, Cobra ends. 1986 Cobra legislation. Cobra Kai equals definition of a female cobra. Cobra in more recent years. May 2, 2018, Cobra Kai debut, Kamen Rider. May 2, 2018, Time to Get All Clean, Bath Song 7th most disliked YouTube video in history. Parody of Baby Shark Dance. Symbol of cleanup. I defined Cobra as it was used to symbolize a number of bad actors like certain remnants of the KGB and other forces. Today one of my students one-upped my work by ascertaining the root symbol of Cobra. Correctly defining a root is endgame for decoding any specific subject as it unlocks every variant and iteration. It's another impressive feat by them. Okay, before I explain the root, I have to define snake symbolism. That is a calm I solved the root for years ago. Snake symbolism is simply many people working as one. No matter the snake variant, it's going to have that specific meaning when used as a com. This includes variants like dragon, but those do have additional meanings, they build onto snake. The same is true of cobra. The root symbol for cobra is the fact that cobras are famous for eating other snakes. The moment I heard this fact, everything clicked. This always happens when a root is correctly defined. E.g., cobra equals evil entity taking over KGB remnant cells. The symbol for the secret final villain of Kamen Rider, the origin of all Power Ranger shows, was a masked figure revealed to be a bunch of snakes. Relevant today. King Cobra newly under arrest and facing charges for ridiculous things. Looks like more ops demonstrating to sideline Cobra watchers why they need to cooperate, or this will be them. Trump's legal issues are also an example of this. Trump asserts this week, deny entry to all communists and markers, and deny them access to our instead of country. At Council Bluffs, bluff symbolism. What is being bluffed? Looking at past examples of bluffs, comms. One of which being demanding accountability for the failed Mueller report. A logical com given Mueller flipped rather than charged, thus as Republicans demanded for accountability, it was with a wink. Bluff. Even then the reporting focused on Ukraine. I haven't yet solved this com, but I think it works as a good teaser for readers to try it themselves. This last month there has been an explosive growth in the number of high-quality decodes from people reading my work. Given how microscopic my audience is, what does this demonstrate about the future potential? Especially if I ever start focusing on presentation. Right now I'm just solving as much as possible as quick as possible. Often with tons of embarrassing errors made out of haste, but for every mistake there's multiple big new decodes that are spot on. It means good things. I'm excited for the future and I have no intention of slowing down, in fact I'm going faster and faster, and it won't stop until I've either decoded literally every subject that exists or enough people reach my level and take on those tasks, so I don't have to. I'm betting the latter happens first. Telegram chat. Join the Decoding Blog Telegram group. Begin decoding. Send leads. This has been Baseball Perfection.